Hello Fear Seekers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be diving into some disturbing, allegedly true, horror stories. If you enjoy the content and want to help the channel grow, consider leaving a like and subscribing to keep up with future videos. Now without further ado, sit back, put any idea of sleep away, and get ready to ferment your fears. Although it doesn't seem like it, this happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years ago. I was in the later years of high school and was home alone. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift. At that time, my family lived in a very well-known East Coast city in a blue-collar neighborhood that was starting to take a nosedive. As a teenager, I was a bit of a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was a big dude who had friends and went on dates, but I'm a natural introvert, so I cherished the rare alone time that I got. This weekend, I was looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine, play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, then order a late takeout dinner, pizza or Chinese, and pig out while watching some Dragon Ball Z. Then around 2 a.m., fall asleep on the couch with my old dog Cecil. Cecil was a beagle who was as old as the hills, and had been in our family for about 8 years. He was quiet and peaceful and spent his time begging for food and sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. He was more than content to rest his head on your lap and spend the night there. Anyway, back to the story. It's approximately 1 a.m. and I had just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I hear a bang coming from the back alleyway. I didn't think much of it. Anyone who has lived in a city knows noises happen at all moments of the night. Cecil's head popped up off my lap and the hair on his back stood up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not more than 2 minutes later, I hear another bang, and Cecil did something I have never seen him do before. He leapt off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd canine unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which got my adrenaline pumping. Through the dog's barking, I can now make out a persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted and was hard to open, even with a key, and it made a lot of noise. I suddenly realized that someone was trying to break into my house through my basement door. Quick little bit of context for anyone who hasn't lived in a bad neighborhood. If someone tries to get into your house and moves on after they realize the door is locked, they want your stuff. If someone is persistently trying to get into your house despite the door being locked, well, they want you. Knowing this, I rush upstairs to grab the heavy wood baseball bat that I keep under my bed for situations like this. Then, I head down to my basement. I probably should have ran, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and plus I had nowhere to go. While I'm heading down the stairs to my basement, Cecil blows past me with the speed and aggression of a dog half his age. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice say, "Oh crap," and the banging stopped. I didn't call the cops or anyone else, which was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. I just sat up for the rest of the night with a bat in hand. My brother came home that morning and I told him what had happened. We went to the basement door to take a look, and when we gave it a tug to open it, the whole door fell off. This psycho was one good shove away from getting in my house, but old Cecil had scared him off. I'm pretty sure that lazy fat old dog saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismiss his actions as a dog doing what a dog was supposed to do. But when I tell you that Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life, You can take that to the bank. It was almost like he knew the urgency, like he knew that door was gonna give. A few years back, we had to have him put down because he had just no will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got a moment alone with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he had done that night. At this point, I was a grown man with a wife and kids. I'm convinced none of that would have happened without old Cecil. Thanks, pal. I miss you. I want to start off by saying that everything I've written down here is true. None of it was made up. I'm not a scary story writer or anything. I just need to share this experience with someone, and I'm afraid of how the people around me would react. Me and my girlfriend like to use recreational drugs sometimes. They're called research chemicals. On Friday, July 29th, 2022, we used some uppers. The ones we used give you a rush and energy, but have no psychedelic or hallucination-inducing effects. We had a great time and slept it off the next day, both of us waking up late in the afternoon. We had a good breakfast and Netflix and chilled for a while. She lives in a studio apartment and has pet rats, so we can't smoke inside because they have sensitive lungs. The building she lives in has a public balcony, so that's where we went out to smoke about every hour or so. It was a small balcony on the second floor, with wood railings and a stone floor overlooking the neighborhood. The building's rule was that nobody was allowed on the balcony after 10 p.m. We didn't really give a crap about that rule, and neither did anybody else, so we'd smoke there in the evenings too. It was on Saturday night, July 30th, that we went for a smoke outside again. Must have been midnight. We were reminiscing about the day before. About halfway through our cigarettes, I suddenly heard a weird noise very far in the background. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and since we were having a conversation, I tried to ignore it. It stopped after a couple of seconds. I noticed it stopped, but paid no mind. When our cigarettes were done, we were still just standing on the balcony talking, when I suddenly heard the sound again and immediately asked my girlfriend to be quiet. "Why?" she asked. I responded with, "Shh." I was listening to what that sound was, and as it was now quiet, I was able to hear it more clearly. After a few seconds, I realized what I was hearing, and I felt a cold chill running down my spine like my soul got sucked down through the floor. My whole face went pale. "I hear a woman screaming," I said. She laughed at first and jokingly asked if I was high on something. I told her to shut up for a second and really listen. She noticed how dead serious I was, and she turned her ear towards the end of the balcony, and as she heard it, I saw her face turn just as pale. "That's a woman screaming," she said. Our first thoughts were that somehow we had taken some really bad drugs and had some kind of weird shared psychosis after effect. We immediately checked if we had any symptoms of overdosing or after effects. No sweats, no high heart rate, no fatigue, no crazy thoughts. Both of us were able to think and talk clearly. We concluded that the sound we were hearing, a woman screaming, was real. The reason this struck us so was because it wasn't a normal kind of scream. It wasn't somebody getting scared or mugged or whatever. This scream was different. It echoed. It carried a hopelessness in its tone. It sounded so vague and far away, like it was carried to us by the winds. The scream sounded like somebody screamed their soul out of their body and into the sky. Both of us nailed to the floor, we kept listening in silence. Some loud-ass teenagers were cycling home, probably from a bar or something, and screaming at each other. Both of us could finally breathe again. "Well, that was the logical conclusion. Just some loud teenagers," she said. I initially agreed, but when they were far beyond what we could hear, the screams came back again. their sound even more desperate now. I did not hesitate and immediately called emergency services. I explained to them what we had heard and how it had affected us. They told us they were sending a police car over. We were outside in the parking lot near a main entrance, waiting for them, still hearing these faraway screams. The police arrived at 1:45. 2 officers, one male, one female, introduced themselves and asked us to explain in detail what we had experienced. So we told them exactly what we had heard and where we heard it come from. The male officer didn't take it too seriously and tried to ease out of it by saying it was probably just mating frogs. Apparently they make a scream-like sound when mating. The female officer took us more seriously and stood with us listening. And very faintly, like whoever was screaming was running out of energy and time, we heard her again. So did the female officer. She immediately contacted the station and they set out a search and rescue. We were thanked for reporting this and they left. For me, it wasn't done yet though. We sat back down on the balcony and kept listening. As we were sitting there, the night sky turned a pulsating blue from all the police cars driving around trying to find this screaming woman. We sat there just listening to the continued screaming, hoping it would stop when they found her. Must have been about 20 minutes later, almost 1:30, that the screams finally stopped. My hopes were that the police had found her and she was safe, but deep down I had a feeling that she wasn't. That Wednesday, I was at my mother's house for dinner. She lives in the same town as me. During dinner, I told her what we had experienced and how frightening it all was. My mother stood up without saying a word, walked over to the living room, grabbed that day's paper and handed it over to me. "Woman found dead under fallen tree," the headline read. I was shocked. I felt my eyes filling up with tears and said with a shaky voice, "I heard this woman die." Against my better judgment, I kept reading. The 47-year-old woman was on a midnight walk in the woods last Saturday night when a tree fell over and crushed her legs. Local authorities believe the woman may have survived for several hours before succumbing to her injuries. She had been dead for almost 72 hours before she was found. The police refused to share further details as to her identity or passing. There was more in the article, but I could not, and refused to, read it through my tears. I did not have it in me to share this with my girlfriend out of fear of how she would take it. But that's not the most disturbing part of all of this. I live alone, and sometimes when I'm in bed and can't sleep, at midnight, I can still hear her screaming. Sometimes my doorbell rings in the middle of the night, but when I go to check, there's never anybody there. I had a camera doorbell installed, and the only thing I caught on camera was the sound of my doorbell ringing. Sometimes I hear a weird knocking sound like somebody is banging on wood. Stuff in my house seems to relocate on itself, such as clothing, food, and tools. My fridge door sometimes opens by itself. Whenever I look at my kitchen door, it feels like something is watching me. My cat Robin seems to stare at nothing in the corners and sometimes even gets a big tail as she starts hissing at these empty corners. Ever since all that happened, my TV has this weird thing where it turns itself back on after I turn it off. It's only when I take the plug out of the socket that it stays off. All these things seem to only happen between midnight and 1:30. The most horrible thing is I can hear her screaming when it's silent around me. I called my doctor about this because I thought I was going insane. She referred me to a team of therapists. After countless hours of talks and sessions, they confirmed that I suffer no form of delusion, hallucination, psychosis, or any other mental illness that could cause me to experience all this. But I still do. She still screams at me. Last night, January 2nd, 2023, I heard her screaming and banging again. When I went to bed and shut the lights off, I kept having this feeling like someone was standing next to my bed, watching me. And so I decided today, January 3rd, that I should write down this experience and share it in hopes that she may find some rest in the knowledge that she won't be forgotten. Since we never got a name, I simply call her the Screaming Woman. May she rest in peace. I'm a police officer in the southern US, in a suburban department of about 100 sworn officers. I work in a college town. I've been on about 10 years now, made sergeant 4 years ago, but at the time of this story, I was just 2 years on, working night shift patrol. I've been lucky that not a lot has affected me, mentally anyway, during my career. I don't have kids. That's how it gets to you usually. You can build all the mental walls you want, but when you have an emotional connection with your kids, and see something happening to kids, the walls mean nothing. Anyway, this one stuck with me. Still makes my hair stand on end, especially when it rains. I get put on a call of shots fired. Now, normally these calls turn out to be either fireworks or perhaps a car backfiring, but mostly fireworks. So unless we get multiple calls on it, or a confirmed gunman or someone confirmed wounded, we just send one unit. That night it was me. The shots fired was reported around a college football stadium. This was during football season, so there were a bunch of really big white tents set up all around the parking lots for tailgaters. I notified dispatch that I was on scene and started rolling through the parking lots, casting my spotlight here and there. It was raining pretty heavily and made it hard to see. About halfway through the lots, my spotlight illuminated the silhouette of a man sitting in a folding chair, under one of those big tents. I pulled closer and lit him up and notified dispatch that I was out with one in the parking lot. His back was to me. He appeared to be hunched forward as if his elbows were on his knees and his head leaning forward. I walked towards him and started calling out to him. Can't remember exactly what I said, but something like, "Hey man, you okay? You heard anything strange? Can you come talk to me?" He didn't move or answer. As I drew closer, I lit him up with my flashlight. I then noticed the outline of a shotgun on the pavement next to him. Combined with him not answering and the nature of the call, it was enough for me to break leather and have dispatch hold the channel. I kept calling to him as I approached, asking him to show me his hands, etc. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. My handgun, Glock Model 22, has a Streamlight TLR-1 light on it, so I had him lit up. 6 feet, under the tent with him. 5 feet. 4. I close on him, come around to the front of him. Shotgun suicides are difficult. Often if they put the barrel under their chin, the blast from the barrel will blow the gun out from under their chin before the shot ever hits them. There was a guy in my hometown that succeeded in a shotgun suicide, only because he did it in front of a pond. Put the barrel under his chin, pulled the trigger. Only managed to blow his face off. Coroner said he probably ran around screaming through the hole that used to be his mouth before he drowned in the pond. This guy succeeded. Blew his head clean off. You do this job long enough, you notice funny little details. His elbows were indeed resting on his knees. It was as though he blew his head off, set the shotgun on the ground next to him, and then leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees to think about what he'd done. About that time, I noticed that, even though I was under the tent with him, it felt like it was still raining. And then, I looked up. Hey guys, glad to see you made it to the end of the video. Have you ever had any creepy encounters in your day-to-day life? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you have any requests for future videos, be sure to let me know and I'll do my best to work them into future content. Alright guys, that just about wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So long, Fear Seekers. I'll see you in the next video.
She's not